little better.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at basically the entire Expo Arms product line. Everything from their assembled uppers to individual components, BCGs, rails, barrels. Specifically, we have the 10.3, the 11.5, and the 13.9, and the 11.5 is one of their assembled uppers. But before we get into all of that, we actually need to talk about the sponsor of the video, and that is Aura. First off, a big thanks to Aura for sponsoring the video and the channel. Not a lot of companies are willing to put their name on a channel like mine, and for that we do appreciate it, so big thanks to Aura. Now, if you're not familiar with Aura, that's fine, neither was I until a couple of weeks ago. They are basically an all-in-one VPN, identity theft protection, fraud protection, password manager. They basically do it all. Now, every plan that they offer also comes with up to $1 million in identity theft insurance to cover the losses from identity fraud, fees, so on and so forth. Now, with Aura, you also get their VPN service for up to 10 devices to protect your location, information, and for all of your safe browsing needs. Now, currently there is a link in the description for a 2-week free trial. Just by signing up for a free trial, it is insanely supportive of the channel, and I mean insanely supportive of the channel. So if that is something that is of interest to you, VPNs, identity theft protection, password manager, basically the works, go ahead and check that out. Once again, that is Aura, linked in the description. A big thanks to Aura for sponsoring the video and the channel. Now, with all of that out of the way, if you're not familiar with Expo Arms, I have done a couple videos on their products in the past. I have a few videos on my channel and some on the Gun.Deals channel as well. They are basically an in-house brand name for primary arms via contract manufacturing, rebranding, that sort of thing. Now, that is a very common practice within the industry, and it allows companies that don't necessarily have the manufacturing capabilities in a specific industry to still get parts and assemblies and whatnot made to their own specific specifications. Now, I did reach out to Primary Arms for all of these products, so they did send me the 10.3 barrel handguard, the 11.5 complete upper assembly, their hard chrome BCG, as well as the 13.9 barrel as well for testing. So they sent me all of that for free. I did not pay for it whatsoever. So keep that in mind. And on top of that, there's of course a long-term relationship with Primary Arms. I am a dealer for them. I buy thousands of dollars worth of products from their wholesale side, and they also send me a ton of products to review for free. So again, keep that in mind going forward. Now, we're gonna specifically be going over the individual parts, and then I also have one of their assembled uppers that they assembled from the factory. I did not touch, so all of the issues with the assembly, we will get into that. So there'll kind of be two parts to the video, essentially going over the individual components and their quality on their own, as well as the one assembled upper, which is this one here. This is the 11.5, that their assembly wasn't quite up to par in a couple places. Now, to put our best foot forward, let's go ahead and start with the one that was not machined properly from the factory, and that is going to be the 10.3-inch Socom. Now, getting into the specifics of the barrel and handguard, which are the Expo Arms products on this build. The barrel is, of course, a 10.3-inch Socom barrel, carbine length gas system. The barrel is dimpled. It is made out of the true mil-spec 4150, a bunch of letters and numbers for the actual mil-spec barrel steel. All good there. On top of that, it is also chrome lined with the proper crane spec gas port of .070. It is going to be a very, very soft shooter. Now, keep in mind with that Socom profile, it's also a very heavy barrel. Socom profiles are like one step underneath a heavy barrel. So it is a very heavy barrel. Even for a 10.3, it's going to be heavier than a lot of 14.5s and 16-inch barrels that have a more weight-efficient profile. Now, most of the conjecture online and my own personal intuition as well says that most of the Expo Arms barrels are made by Rosco. So Rosco is the actual OEM for a lot of the Expo Arms barrels. Now, I can't speak to every individual Expo Arms barrels because they could be using different manufacturers for different barrels, but again, a lot of them do appear to be Rosco. Now, this one here was not machined or finished properly from the factory. So basically, the chamber inside, which is chrome lined, because this is a chrome lined barrel again, was not finished properly. There were essentially raised ridges or sharp edges, burrs inside of the chamber that would not allow a case to get extracted. It was very difficult to get a picture of it. Basically, for the first 10 rounds, I took it out just to test fire it after assembly and whatnot, and it would not extract whatsoever. The extractor on their BCG was perfectly fine, had plenty of strength on it. There was no issues with that. It was actually deforming the case rim itself as it tried to pull it out of the chamber. Then when I beat the cases out of a barrel with a cleaning rod, the barrels just, the cases themselves that would not extract just had like claw marks up and down the case from the chamber not being finished properly. So I was able to fix that using a copper brush and hooking it up to a drill and just going to town on the chamber. So I did finish the chamber properly myself. I probably didn't get it quite to 100% because even after that, we were still having some issues with the gun being undergassed. Now, the proper crane spec .070 is a very, very soft shooting upper with carbine buffer, carbine springs. You do not need to use a heavy buffer whatsoever with that proper crane spec gas port. Keep in mind, I was using full power M193 or possibly some Fiocchi 223 as well, but good enough ammo that it definitely should have been running the system. However, I had to use a lightweight buffer, a H0 buffer basically. I took out all the steel weights in a buffer and used a reduced power spring, and it still was not cycling properly. That probably had to do with the fact that I didn't quite finish up the chamber enough, so there was still a little bit of resistance, slowing down the extraction, slowing down the BCG, so I wasn't getting full lockback, and sometimes it would not feed the next round just because it didn't have quite enough energy, even though I was using full power ammo. Now, the fix for that, again, for me was fairly easy. So this gas port currently is sitting at a .074. And as you guys saw in the intro, this gun is basically perfectly gassed, sitting at about 330 with, again, full power M193 for a 10.3. Granted, a very heavy 10.3 with everything that's on here. It is a very, very soft, very smooth shooting upper receiver. Now, that is going to be one of the issues when you get into cheaper products, is you're going to get some issues with QC. Now, that is a QC issue on both Expo arms, primary arms, and of course the actual OEM, whether that was Roscoe, Ballistic Advantage, or somebody else. Now, where the blame actually lies for that doesn't really matter all that much to me. The barrel probably shouldn't have passed even a good visual inspection, and that's going to be one of the risks that you take when you buy, a more budget product, because Expo Arms products are priced very competitively. When they're on sale, they can be incredibly cheap and some of the cheapest products on the market. And if you're getting a good one, which we'll talk about other good ones here in a minute, you are getting a very good value for your money, but you might also run into some QC issues. Now, Primary Arms does have very good customer service. If you have an issue with their products, they are 100% backed by a lifetime warranty. So if you have an issue, manufacturing defect, breakage, anything like that, they will take care of you. However, we do want to avoid those issues in the first place. Now, again, getting into how it actually performs in its current state, with that .074 gas port size and the slightly messed up chamber, it is ejecting very nicely, 330 with full power ammunition, very softly gassed, no problems whatsoever. Unfortunately, when we talk about accuracy on this barrel, it didn't really perform in terms of mechanical accuracy. I was getting anywhere from like 3 to 4 MOA with ball ammo and about 2 MOA plus with match ammo. That's not particularly great for a heavy barrel, because keep in mind this is a Socom profile barrel. It is a very heavy profile barrel, and you're not really getting any of the accuracy out of that, so you'd probably just be better off with a government profile barrel and save yourself about 8 ounces. Now, this upper receiver I was able to take out to about 400 yards with the Primary Arms Nova, the 1-6 Nova, which is a very good LPVO. And it's still, even though the accuracy wasn't great inside of 300-400 yards, it's not going to matter all that much anyways. And again, if you're doing your part, you're still going to be able to hit decent-sized targets. But just know the accuracy that I was able to get out of this barrel, maybe a properly machined one would have performed a little bit better. I can't really say. I can only review the one that I have here. But the accuracy that I was able to get out of it was not so great. Shootability, very good once I fixed it. Accuracy, not so great. Talking about the handguard itself, I do have a couple of their handguards. This is the 9-inch version. Then I also have, I believe, the 10-inch, 10.5-inch version on their 11.5, which we'll get into in just a minute. These are manufactured by, I believe, NBS, or AR-15 Discounts calls them the NBS. I don't know who's actually making them, but there is some company that's pumping out a lot of these for a lot of different companies, because they all basically have the exact same design, lockup, so on and so forth. These are just branded as Expo Arms. Now, the rail itself, again, this is the 9-inch version. This is 7-sided M-LOK, all good there. Full-length Picatinny rail on top, though, again, for NBS, they make ones with the Picatinny rail scalped out, and that's really the only difference. Now, in terms of the lockup itself on the handguard, it's a bit of a mix of both worlds. So the 2 outside screws are just clamp screws that pull the handguard together around the bottom of the barrel nut. And then the middle screw is attached to a steel wedge on the other side. And that steel wedge actually drives into the barrel nut itself, providing direct contact. So it's a clamp and it's a wedge. And on top of that, you do have rotation limiting tabs, not anti-rotation tabs, because they don't really touch on either side. So there is still a little bit of wiggle. So in theory, they will limit the maximum amount of rotation, but they probably won't eliminate rotation, if that makes sense. For a cheap handguard, you can find these under $100 quite often. For a cheap handguard, that's perfectly fine unless you're mounting some sort of, laser aiming module. Not this laser aiming module, because this one doesn't hold 0 to begin with, so it doesn't matter. But again, if you are putting a very expensive laser aiming module on your gun, you might want to spend a little bit more money on their handguards. They do have, I believe they have a combat model and like another model that I believe is made by like Zeb or Sons of Liberty Gunworks or somebody like that. This is their very basic handguard, and for a very basic handguard, it is perfectly fine. Now we're actually going to skip the 11.5 for now because we need to talk about the assembly on that, because that was one of the uppers that they assembled from the factory, so we can review that process as well. This is just the 13.9 Expo Arms there patrol barrel, so I think it's 13.95 inches, 1-in-7 twist, 4150 chrome moly vanadium steel. This is a black nitride finish, kind of a government profile, not really. And again, I believe the OEM on this is Rosco. Now, 13.95's the proper gas port size is a .078 to .080. I will accept anything in that range. And this gas port size is .0785, so it is all good there. And again, as you probably saw in the intro, it shoots very, very nicely with full power ammo. Now, in terms of the specs on this barrel, very good, no problems whatsoever. This one I probably have the most rounds on. One, because it's one of my preferred barrel length, 13.95, mid-length, proper gas port size, not a particularly heavy profile, just a government, not necessarily the most weight-efficient profile out there, but it is just fine for all intents and purposes. And it's also very accurate, and again, very well gassed. Now, getting into the accuracy on the 13.95, this is very good. So with ball ammunition, I was able to get around 2 MOA, which I'm always happy with. Anywhere between 1.5 and 2.5 MOA with ball ammo, just cheap, 35, 40 cents a round ball ammo, I'm very happy with. And then with match ammunition, I believe right now I'm currently using HSM 77 grain. That's kind of my go-to match round right now, getting very close to 1 MOA, and that is very good. Most of the time with this upper, I believe I had it with the Athlon 1-10, which is currently on the 11.5 for a different reason we'll talk about in just a minute. And with that 1-10, I was able to take it out to 600 yards, which again, for a 13.95 with match ammo, very doable. Now, these barrels also represent an extreme value in the market, so I believe they go on sale for around $100 or so, which is about $50 cheaper than the actual Rosco barrel. And from what I'm seeing here, you're getting the exact same amount of performance as the Rosco barrel, the same gassing, same profile, same finish quality, same accuracy. Again, but you're able to save, $50, 30%, and get all of the performance. So that is a big win in my book if you're able to snag one of these on sale. I think the 13.95 Patrol by Expo Arms, Expo Arms rebranded Rosco, whatever you want to call it, if you get a good deal on it, represents a very, very good value. Almost no complaints about it whatsoever. You might say, oh, well, I don't like the government profile because there's an extra ounce at the end of the barrel that they could have put back here, so on and so forth. To me, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. And again, the performance, accuracy was very good. The shootability, very good with the proper gas port size. Again, almost no issues whatsoever. The price is even very good. Moving on to the last upper receiver before my voice goes out, this is the Expo Arms 11.5. Now, this upper receiver is completely Expo Arms and completely assembled by them from the factory. I did not mark it up. I did not touch it whatsoever. So everything that went right or wrong with this upper receiver was as it came from them from the factory to kind of test out their assembly process. The only thing on the upper that is not Expo Arms is the Breek micro charging handle, which is a nice charging handle. I quite like it. Even the hard chrome BCG, which we will talk about in just a minute, is from Expo Arms. Now, getting into specifics on the 11.5, this is, of course, a 11.5 carbine length barrel. This is also the Socom profile, so it is, again, a very, very heavy profile behind the gas block, and then it's about a .750 in front of the gas block, so basically a straight taper, a little step down in there, but it is, again, basically one step underneath a heavy barrel. Now, 1-in-7 twist, gas port on this barrel is .070, which, as you might know, is the same as a crane spec on a 10.3, but we have 1.2 inches of extra dwell time, which is about 40% more dwell time. So this upper receiver, when it is running properly, is going to be a little bit more punchy with full power ammunition, maybe about 2:30 to 3 o'clock versus, again, that 3 o'clock to 3:30 that is necessarily ideal. Now, we did run into some issues with this, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. This is, of course, a phosphite chrome-lined barrel, so the same specs as the 10.3 in basically every way, mil-spec steel, all that sort of good stuff. Dimpled barrel, half by 28, 1 in 7 twist, if I didn't already mention that. The barrel was finished properly, so there was no issues with the chamber or with the finish on the chrome lining. Everything looks very good on it. In terms of the rest of the components, we've already talked about the handguard a little bit. Same exact handguard lockup on this one. You have 2 clamps, 1 wedge, anti-rotation or rotation limiting tabs, 7-sided M-lock, full-size Picatinny. This is the 10.5-inch rail, I believe. As far as the upper receiver goes, it looks like a Blem roll mark. The roll mark looks a little bit fudged, but it's just a standard 7075 T6 aluminum mil-spec forged upper receiver. No issues there. The BCG, we will talk about it by itself because I do think the BCG is very good, especially for the price that they're asking for it. The issue that we had with this upper receiver from them is that it took only 60 rounds for the gas block to start walking forward on the barrel because it was not torqued down properly. Now, that is probably the most common issue I have with factory assembled guns from more budget companies, is that the gas block, for whatever reason, it was in the proper spot, it was in the dimple, but the gas block screws just were not torqued down whatsoever. No rock set, no high temperature Loctite, nothing like that. And they just walked out after, again, I think it was 60 rounds, maybe less than 60 rounds. And then the gun would no longer cycle. Now, for those first 60 rounds, I was like, wow, this is a very, very soft shooting upper receiver, which is kind of odd considering, again, it has the same gas port size as a shorter barrel, so it has more dwell time, more pressure at the port running the gun. So you would think it would run a little bit hotter, but it was running super soft. And the reason for that was because the gas block was working its way off with every shot. Now that the gas block is fixed properly and torqued down, because of course I had to fix it, it is a little bit more punchy, again, ejecting at around 2:30 to 3 with full power ammunition, which is still fine, but not necessarily that perfect, idyllic ejection pattern that a lot of people are looking for. Other than that, the rest of the assembly was pretty good. So I didn't have any issues with the screws on the handguard moving or coming loose. The barrel nut did not come loose. It does appear to have anti-seize attached or applied to the upper receiver threads, which is another thing that a lot of companies don't do, so that is a good on them from Expo Arms. Everything else I really didn't have an issue with. I just wish that the gas block was actually torqued down properly, because again, they look like they were just barely finger tight because they were just completely loose when I noticed it, and of course had to torque them down and fix it myself. Everything else on the gun seems to be just fine in terms of assembly. It is unfortunate, but it is one of those things with budget companies that you kind of have to do your own QC every time you get one out of the box. You probably want to check the torque on the handguard, barrel nut, gas block, so on and so forth, to make sure that something doesn't just randomly come off the gun the first time you take it out, and then that ruins your range day because you forgot the specific tool that you needed at home. That sort of thing. Now, the last component that we need to talk about before we get to value and recommendations with Expo Arms is going to be their hard chrome BCG. Now, hard chrome is still probably one of the best coatings you can use. You know, you have nickel boron, titanium nitride, all very good, and a few other special coatings out there as well. But hard chrome is one of those things that it's incredibly strong, about 50, 55 HRC, somewhere in that range. Incredibly heat resistant, corrosion resistant, so on and so forth, very lubricious, all of those good things. Currently, this BCG has not been cleaned, and this is the only BCG that I've been using in these 3 upper receivers for about 2,000 rounds. Now, hard chrome is one of those things that is very easy to clean. The stuff basically just comes right off of it, even with just like a dry rag, like this is just a basic shop towel, because again, stuff doesn't really stick to it very well. Nickel boron can kind of absorb some of the stuff into the finish, so you get like a smoky gray finish versus like, again, a hard chrome. That is going to clean up extremely easy. This is going to be one of those things that's going to last you a very, very long time in terms of the finish. Actually getting into the bolt itself, I believe this is a 9310 bolt, which is fine. Carpenter 158 does have advantages over 9310 and vice versa, so it's not necessarily just like, oh, 9310 is 7% stronger or whatnot, therefore it's better. There are a lot of things to consider about bolts. Now, the gas ring seal, after about 2,000 rounds, is just a little bit loose. You can tell that the tension is starting to go away, and that is going to be the fit between the gas rings on the bolt and the inside the bore of the carrier itself. Then you can tell that that is starting to wane just a little bit. So maybe over the next 2,000 rounds, I may need to swap out the gas rings. That is totally normal. Gas rings go out 3,000 to 5,000 rounds. I've had some on very overgassed guns because, of course, you have a lot more gas than you need. They can last longer. But on guns that are gassed properly, as soon as you start to lose some of that gas, now they become undergassed. Now, one of the advantages of having a coating that is very hard, like, again, hard chrome, is that the finish where I've cleaned it up looks basically perfect. There is almost no wear on it whatsoever. The back of the lugs look very good. On the Expo arms, they are chamfered in like a small 45-degree angle on the back left corner of the lugs for a little bit smoother lock and unlock. It also helps to take some wear off of them as they're locking and unlocking in the barrel, of course. In terms of our extractor and ejector, we still have very good tension on both of them, meaning that I was not having any issues with extraction or ejection. Again, the only times I had issues with extraction and this BCG was when the chamber on the 10-3 was not finished properly and the extractor was actually bending out the case rim. So the extractor has plenty of force on it, good springs that they're using there. I believe they're using the mil-spec spring Vuitton O-ring plus insert, which is probably more than you need, but you'd rather have more than you need than less than you need, and the ejector seems to be doing its job just fine. Now, another area where these guys do a very good job is the fact that you can find the blems, which this is actually a blem. Don't know where the blem is, but the blems, I believe, are under $100 at times, and the full hard chrome BCG no blem is about $120, $130, which is, again, a fantastic deal for one of the best coatings in the game, and overall a decent BCG. You have good staking on the gas keys themselves. The staking the bolts are grade 8 fasteners, so there's no issues there. And again, I have not had a single issue with the BCG. It is holding up very well in terms of the finish is, of course, basically perfect, but also its function has maintained a very good level, again, after about 2,000 rounds. So as you guys can probably tell, we have a little bit of a mixed bag from Expo Arms. Most of the products that I've gotten from them have worked very well to a very high level, especially considering the price to performance. Very good in that regard. Some of them have had issues in terms of the manufacturing process, like that 10-3 barrel. The 11.5 had a assembly issue. Now, it wasn't like a very difficult fix torquing down a gas block, but again, it is one of those things. You are paying them to assemble it, so you would hope that they would assemble it as you paid them to do. The issue in manufacturing on the 10-3 to me personally is going to be a little bit bigger of an issue, and it's not something that I would recommend somebody trying to fix at home. I've done it a lot, so I can do it without much issue, but it's not necessarily something I would recommend just a random person do. If you have the time, just send it back to Primary Arms and they will probably get it fixed for you. I have heard good things about their customer service, so I'm sure that they would get that done for you. At the end of the day, Expo Arms is a value company. It's not going to be the best at any one thing. You might run into some assembly issues, some QC issues. It's kind of par for the course for the price category. However, if you get a good one, you are still going to be getting a very good level of performance for the money. The 11.5 was very accurate. I didn't really talk about that, but about, again, 2.5 MOA with ball, 1.5 MOA with match ammo. Very happy with that. The 13.9, I have absolutely no issues with whatsoever. If you can find that on a good deal, that is an excellent barrel length, gas port size. All of the features on that are very good. The 10.3 Socom, the 11.5 Socom are probably a little bit more niche just by virtue of them being short Socom barrels. The feature set on them is very mil-spec, phosphate, chrome, proper steel, proper gas port size. For the most part, the .070 could be a little bit smaller on the 11.5, but overall still just fine. Now, at the end of the day, I do think Expo Arms represents a very good value in the marketplace, especially if you're buying on sale, buying individual parts, so on and so forth. I think that you definitely can get a very good deal. Certain parts are going to be very good. The 11.5 Socom, 10.3 Socoms are going to be a little bit more niche just by virtue of their form factor, size, features, so on and so forth. But again, depending on what you're looking for, the BCGs seem to be very good. The 13.95 barrel is something I would absolutely recommend, especially if you get it on a deal. The other parts, assembly, rails are just fine. For a budget brand, it is probably another good option if they tighten up some of the QC issues here and there over the next few years, because it is a very early on process for Expo arms and primary arms. I think that it could be a good powerhouse in the budget space, just like primary arms is in general. As of right now, again, you find a good part on deal, you're most likely going to be getting a very good part that's machined well by a good company, and you're going to be saving some money and still getting good performance out of it. So with all of that out of the way, guys, let me know what you guys think of Expo arms and the individual products that we're showcasing here, and what some of your other favorite budget brands are. But with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off. Thought I had more than 2 rounds left. I did not.